Hello, everybody, and welcome on this very, very, very cold Tuesday, the 11th. And thank you for joining. The intent of this webinar is more to actually answer questions and answers. There's a lot of questions coming up, and if I have to talk about depression you can't talk about depression in its entirety. If I was to start to talk about depression in a very comprehensive way, it will take a couple of days. So I just want to go through the basics, my personal experience and my personal perspective on depression and the factors that play into it, and natural things that I found to work for depression, very, very briefly, and then actually open up for questions and see what kinds of questions there are out there, and if I am able to maybe answer them. So firstly, depression is a very, very big thing in the world at the moment. And let's start off with, there was an umbrella study done recently. So what an umbrella study is an umbrella study is a study that takes all other studies that has been done since the introduction of SSRIs, which would be your Prozacs and your pharmaceutical antidepressants. So they took all the clinical studies that was done since the inception of these medicines, and they did an overview of them. And what they found in this overview is they can not, in a statistical way, be linked to either low or high serotonin. Serotonin does play a role in depression, and I will go into that briefly. But what this study found is quite interesting. They are looking at the reasons behind depression, and it may be even more like cholesterol, where it's not actually high or low cholesterol that causes bad health. It is the balance between the HDL and the LDL, that depression as a whole has to do with the balancing of the neurotransmitters in the system, and not to isolate the one or the other. But we do know that serotonin does play a role in depression. And I really want to briefly go into serotonin and then dopamine as well, and just explain how your body actually conducts electricity and how that actually plays a role in your own perception of reality. You know, one day you can have an off day and something small happens and it's a crisis. And the next day something big could happen, and somehow you're in a state where it's acceptable, you can handle it. And I think a lot of people dealing with depression, I say you're busy drowning, you're in overwhelm, your head is only above the water and everything looks like a crisis. So why is that, and how does it play into the chemicals in your body? And the reason we're looking into that is because the pharmaceutical medicine, as well as especially the plant medicine, actually works on balancing these neurotransmitters. And how does it work? So the first thing that you need to realize is, how does a neurotransmitter work? So I'm going to share my screen and just in a very simplistic, brief way, explain what is actually happening in the body when we receive signals from our own mind, from the environment, that affects our emotional state. And my dogs are going to be quiet about this. So I am going to share my screen. So over here, if everybody can see this, just a very small video. What you can see, this is the neurons in the brain. And as you can see, there's an electrical signal that gets conducted from the one to the other, and it actually jumps between the neurons. So what happens on a physical level is between in your brain, as the signal conducts, between the two neurons, there's what they call a synapse, a cleft, that the signal actually jumps. And the way that this jumps is by neurotransmitter. If you want to look at it as a conductive fluid that you've got in between. So for instance, serotonin would be the green balls. So you have got, firstly, most importantly, there is serotonin within the neuron. It gets released. And then serotonin binds to the receptor side on the next neuron to conduct the message. So say the message is happiness and tranquility. For happiness, serotonin is a big role factor. So if you want to look at it as the conductive fluid that your body actually needs to actually conduct this message, the more serotonin, the stronger the message can conduct, the less serotonin this message cannot conduct. So then you sit with a depressed mood, you sit with sadness, you sit with grief, and everything that goes part with it. Same with dopamine. Dopamine is more to do with motivation and focus. And in a lot of people with depression, dopamine is actually also a problem, and also why it's really difficult to actually get out of bed and get anything done. So the first thing around this that you need to realize is that you need a neurotransmitter to start off with. You need the neurotransmitters to be present in your body and in your brain to be able to conduct the signals that you would like to conduct. Over here, you can see this red. So the red half moons is just symbolic of a reuptake mechanism that is there. So what happens when there's serotonin in the cleft conducting the signal, the ones that do not bind to the receptor side on the other side gets reuptaked and the body reuses it. So in a basic form, what a SSRI like Prozac is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what it does is it prevents the reuptake of the serotonin in the synapse so that there's more serotonin available. But now already, firstly, the chemical imbalance is more, it's not a cause and effect thing. It's more of a symptom of a system as a whole being in dysfunction. Serotonin, 90% of your serotonin gets produced in the gut, and then it travels up. In the gut, there's also an inhibitor that also takes some of your serotonin and metabolizes it. Then it goes up to the brain, it gets released, and the signal gets conducted. The problem is, say, and I'm just talking symbolic, say you need 100 units of serotonin in order to conduct the happiness signals that you would like to conduct. Your gut maybe is producing 50 units, then another 10 units get metabolized by MAO enzymes. Then it goes up to the brain, you've got 30 units left, 20 of them gets released, 10 gets reuptaked. If you take Prozac, maybe you've got 20 or even 30 left, but that's still not enough. So just looking at the chemical part of depression is a very tricky business, and you're actually just looking more at the symptoms. What I like about the plants is the plants work more holistically. If I want to take scaletium is one that I actually want to talk about, and what the difference between scaletium and a traditional chemical SSRI, for instance, is. So scaletium is a plant as a whole, and it's got many, many alkaloids in it. One of the main functions of scaletium is also a SSRI function. So it also helps so that the extra serotonin does not get reuptaked and there's more serotonin left, which then affects the efficacy of the serotonin and how easily the signal can conduct. What is interesting about these plants is scaletium, for instance, has got a really, really strong anti-inflammatory action on the gut. So that means it's starting to heal the body as a whole, starting to look at where the serotonin actually gets synthesized. It also has an action on dopamine, which is now, again, your motivation, your focus. And it also works on the cannabinoid receptors. And without going into the cannabinoid receptors as a whole, the cannabinoid receptors is responsible for the messaging back and forth of how much your body needs and how much your body needs to produce and which neuron is secreting which neurotransmitter. So by looking at the body as a whole, a natural plant like scaletium is actually incredibly effective in helping you actually cope with and lift out of depression. So on this point, I want to tell a story about scaletium that I tell. And when one is in depression, severe depression and anxiety, it's like you're swimming in the ocean and your head is over here. And over there, you see a fire and it's a crisis because you can't breathe and you don't know what to do and you are panicking and you are actually drowning. So what scaletium does, scaletium is a plant which is a living essence, which is one of the most powerful plant teachers I know. Scaletium lifts you above the water. Scaletium does not take away the water. Scaletium gives you an observer perspective on your emotions. And all of a sudden, you're able to see that, you know what, it's kids on a sailboat, they're drying. It's not such a big It's not such a big problem. And once again, Skeletum does that by also helping you with your neurotransmitters and the conduction of signal. And it makes a difference between drowning and overwhelm and actually being able to see something. But like I say, the water is still there. Skeletum holds your hand and be able to actually look at your emotions and go in and out of your emotional field and actually be able to deal with the depth of the emotion so that you can come to a place where you can actually swim on your own. Also, really important about the plant teachers is none of them want you to use them forever. They work on a holistic way to actually heal the body, teach you how to deal with emotions and with your patterns, and then actually guides you to a place where you are more balanced and you are more able to actually look at it yourself. And there's one more story I want to share on Skeletum. I've got this friend, he's a bushman, and he grew up in the field. So I tell people the difference with Skeletum is if I drop you in the Kalahari now, would you survive? No, you won't. So the next option is I give you a lecture. I tell you this is how you make fire, this is how you get shelter, and I drop you. And you might survive, but it might be a really, really, really difficult situation. The next thing is I drop you with Pete in the Kalahari. The first night he makes a fire for you. He gets you food and you sleep safely. And as time goes on, he teaches you, and then you struggle, and then he's there and he guides you. And at the end of the day, it's been an enjoyable journey. And you can actually teach other people to do it yourself. So that's just a brief introduction. I actually want to have a look at the chat section. Especially for younger kids, can you use Skeletum to help improve focus, etc.? For the kids on the spectrum and ADHD issues, yes. So Skeletum has been traditionally used even in infants for colic. The mothers put a little bit of breast milk with Skeletum. Skeletum is quite safe. When used in kids, one must look specifically at the dosage as well. But Skeletum has the ability, and I have used it effectively for people with anxiety. It helps a lot with focus because it works on dopamine as well. It brings in a calmness, and it actually helps the system function better as a whole, which actually helps a lot with concentration and focus. I am going to post with this video just my disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, and one should always consult a medical professional. I can talk from my experience and my perspective, and I can share what I've learned through my studies, through my experience, and through learning from traditional healers as well. Any questions? Anything that you would like me to go into depth further with?
Yeah, yes, Lisa, it's Mash here. I asked a question about the Skeletum for the ADHD. I'm specifically talking about sort of later primary school and early high school students, because these days there's a higher incidence of them being, you know, labeled as ADHD, on spectrum, unable to focus, and there's so much chemical medications being used. So it's specifically from that standpoint and interest that I'm asking the question. What sort of tincture, tablets, sort of dosages, any guidance upon that?
Okay, yes. Okay, so Skeletum specifically is traditionally fermented. The fermentation process activates alkaloids that's not otherwise activated. So I would work with a fermented Skeletum. The dosage, Skeletum is very much dosage dependent. So if in an adult, for instance, if you want to take, just calm down a little bit, and maybe for sleep or something, you'll use 50 to 100 milligrams. For an adult, the dosage that I found and that studies have found to be really effective if you actually want that magic lift is 500 milligrams to a gram twice daily. For kids, it's going to be dependent on the weight of the child and how the child can consume. The fermented powder can be made into an iced tea, which is quite good, with rooibos tea and lemon and honey. The capsules can be swallowed. The scaletium is not very stable in a tincture form. There's actually a scaletium on our website, which is not in alcohol. It's more bioavailable, and it's actually been tested to be stable. It's a very difficult product to actually get stable in tincture form. So there is tinctures available. I would just always check about the bioavailability, and if the studies has actually done that, it is stable in a tincture form. So it's going to be kind of what works best for the child. I have had children who started using scaletium, and that has seen incredible results. Once again, I would only, especially in children, you don't want to interfere with the system when it's not needed. But in children, it's much more safe than any other chemicals. And then also to use it while it's necessary and not to use it for longer than is necessary. Scaletium, on the picture, I also saw there's receptor sites. So another thing that can go wrong is even if you've got enough serotonin, your receptor sites on the other side might be damaged. So scaletium has been shown to actually have neurodegenerative effects and neuroplastic effects. And it can actually help repair the brain and the receptor site, so the system as a whole would function again. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. It's more specifically with, I'm looking at young teenagers in that subgroup. Given that scaletium has sort of calming and sedating or slightly drowsy effects, would you then advise it more as a utilization in the evenings as opposed to daytime usage? Or is it just my misinformation that I think it can cause a little bit of drowsiness or tiredness?
Okay, so the drowsiness and the tiredness is very much dose dependent.
Okay.
So what that means is lower dosages bring that, then you get a higher dosage where you actually, so the Bushmen used it, they call it kaugoed, kana, and they used it when walking long distances. It gives you energy, it gives you endurance, and it gives you focus. And it also helps the body use its own energy in a better way so that one needs less water or less food. Scaletium is amazing for emotional eating. And so the dosage, if the child, say it's a child of 18 years old and the child weighs between, I would say 50 and 70 kilograms, I would look at a dosage of about 500 milligrams to a gram in the morning, and then if needed again in the afternoon. When you are working with higher dosages, like the 500 gram dosage, I would not advise taking it after 4 p.m. It might affect sleep because it does have a stimulant effect at that dosage. And with these plants, it's also really important to actually look at the specific individual you're working with. Because scaletium, the lower dosage is a sedative, then you get energy, focus, motivation. My apologies. I'm not expecting anybody, so I'm just going to leave that. Really, my apologies for that. And then if you go really high, very higher dosages, once again has the sedative effect. So it's very individual. For most people, it works like that. For some people, if you go up to a gram, they've got a sedative effect again. So you really need to look at what is specifically working for you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Of course, Murphy. The timing for somebody just randomly ring my bell would be in the middle of a webinar. I also want to go into, so scaletium is an amazing plant and it works on so many levels. I really believe scaletium to be one of the most profound plant teachers I've ever worked with. Scaletium is the plant that lifted me out of a very, very, very severe depression and actually guided me through it and out of it. And in my history, in my story, I have dealt with very deep depression. And that's also why I do what I do. I want to give people hope. I want to show people that there's a natural solution to go from a point of dysfunctionality to a point of actually thriving. And there's so many natural solutions out there, Scaletium being one of them. And I also do not believe that putting anything from the outside on the inside on its own is a cure. Sometimes you do need the support from the outside. Sometimes you do need to bring the neurotransmitters and everything into balance. But it is really, really important to actually look at the system as a whole, at the cause of it, at nutrition, which is something I can also go into, just the building blocks that is needed for dopamine and serotonin, which most of us are deficient in. Scaletium also is a heart opener. Scaletium is amazing for intimacy. Scaletium is amazing for people with social anxiety. It actually gives you like social skills and the ability and the wanting to talk to people. It also works for OCD and yeah, for anxiety and depression and everything like that. Is there any questions? Or there's one thing I want to actually go into, and give me 1 second. I apologize. Thank you. I have an unexpected friend. He might just quickly say hi to us and sit here. He's one of the wisdom keepers, actually. So I thought that's probably why he came along today. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he's one of the wisdom keepers on Scaletium specifically. So we're grateful for that. I wanted to go into nutrition as well. As I said, the gut is actually where your serotonin gets produced. And that is quite important to actually look at the gut, look at the diet and everything around that. But more than that, there's specific nutrients and minerals that your body actually needs to produce the serotonin and the dopamine. So one of them that is really, really important is magnesium for the whole system as a whole. But it doesn't start with magnesium. Magnesium depletion actually happens most of the time because of a copper depletion. So I'm just quickly going to go into the whole scenario of this, just to give you an overview of how the system functions as a whole and how it's actually really important to look at the system functioning as a whole. So copper is something that's not really talked about and that a lot of research has not been published until recently or not been really known to the medical professional and to doctors and to everybody around that. Copper, one of the things that copper does is copper regulates iron. Your body has a mechanism where it actually recycles its iron when there's not enough copper present. And the thing is, our soils are extremely copper depleted and we don't really get copper in our diets. What happens is the system malfunctions. And the iron that was in the bloodstream gets deposits in the cells. This causes oxidation because iron rusts. Then that causes calcification. And then you've got magnesium that is actually the mechanism to move the oxidation, to move the inflammation, and to get the system into a balance. So when... My apologies. So when one is depressed and one is working in the shadow and one is dealing with trauma or negative emotions, your body actually uses more magnesium than it otherwise would have. Just by upping a person's magnesium that's available to them can lift a person out of depression on its own. There's also a lot of really great studies that's been shown a link between inflammation and depression. So just by looking into inflammation and getting the system as a whole and the inflammation better, actually can also lift people out of depression. The other contributing factor is the thyroid, and the thyroid needs iodine, and the thyroid also needs magnesium. Underactive thyroid can also lead to depression. I've got a question about diet and depression. It's a very, very broad topic. Give me one moment and I'll be with you. Okay, so we've got a surprise visitor. Say hello for the mensa.
Bye bye. Manjat. Arang musik barang sa.
Okay. Okay. So that's Bushman Pete, one of my teachers, and one of Skeletium's biggest advocates as well. If someone is weaning off the using of SSRIs, would you recommend Skeletium on its own or in combination with ashwagandha and lion's mane? If somebody is weaning off SSRIs, so firstly, the book says that you should not combine one SSRI and another SSRI. That is what the literature says. The psychiatrists, they do this all the time. They combine this SSRI with that SSRI. The reason why you don't want to combine two SSRIs is too much serotonin can cause serotonin syndrome. Serotonin syndrome is extremely dangerous and you could actually die from it. So it's really much that you must look at a specific person. When tapering off chemical medicine, you can start adding Skeletium. It can lift. It works well in combination with ashwagandha, which is an adaptogen. It also works really well with lion's mane, which once again is actually repairing the brain. It works well with Blue Lotus. It works well with many, many things. For me, when a person is tapering off SSRIs, it's a very much individual journey. And to look at what that person's specific individual needs are, how long have they been on the medicine, what dosages are they on, what is their current state of being, and what is all the factors that is actually influencing the person. Is there any questions at the moment? You can type the question in the comment section, or you can also unmute yourself and ask. Yes. So I've got a question. Is a 3-week period being free from SSRI enough time for a person to start taking Skeletium? Yes, more than enough. When on lower dosages and you are busy tapering SSRI, Skeletium can already be added. Skeletium can actually be used for perimenopausal and menopausal women. It brings the system as a whole into balance. And there are limited studies where it's actually had a positive effect in balancing the hormones and has helped people with menopausal symptoms. Any questions? Is there any topic you would like me to go into?
Okay, so if we think of a topic specifically with regards to people working energetically and helping clients with trauma or counseling, is there, since seeing Skeletium has the potential to help us with the serotonin, dopamine levels, if you have clients actively dealing with trauma but not on any chemical SSRIs, would you suggest Scaletium as sort of a intermediary assistant to help them through this process?
Yes, definitely. Scaletium for me is that friend that actually holds your hand and makes sure the body gets back into balance. It really gives you that observer perspective where you're actually able to look at how you're feeling and navigate better. I had a friend, she's not depressed, she's got Scaletium and she takes it when necessary. She went to a funeral and she said, thank you so much. It's the first time I actually had the choice between crying while I'm talking to people or actually being able to talk to people. The sadness was still there. It didn't go away. It's still there. But it gives you actually the capacity to be able to deal and to able to navigate your life. And I think that's incredibly important, especially in the times that we're in. People are really struggling. There's a lot of anxiety and many, many things. The way that you feel, the way that your whole perception of the world, your ability to be able to actually navigate your own life and navigate the world and being able to be in a calm space and work out a strategy for whatever is going on in your life, or being able to actually get out of bed and make yourself food, which for a lot of depressed people it's not even possible. That ability is something that is invaluable. And there are, like I said, Scaletium is one of the many, 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 many plants out there that can help. It's a very well all-rounded and effective way to actually be able to bring that. And then when dealing with trauma work, I cannot emphasize the role of magnesium enough, especially people working with trauma. Like everything on the inside, as within, so without. And I found that you can actually explain most things through some chemical, electrical, and hormonal and system in the body. So like I said earlier, where there's a copper deficiency, the iron goes into the cells and causes oxidation, which causes calcification. So on an emotional level, that is actually where your emotions is, the ones that you suppressed, the trauma, the things that you cannot feel or cannot look at. And what is needed for the body to actually work with that and move that in and out of the cell and get rid of that and bring the system back to homeostasis, out of inflammation, out of oxidation, is magnesium. So the more spiritual work, the more emotional work, the more things you do, the more magnesium your body actually needs and uses. And it's really one of the very much components, but it is a very important one. And the reason why I actually sell Scaletium, the reason why I talk about Scaletium and why I do what I do is when I needed it the most, I really had a powerful plant spirit holding my hand. And that is invaluable. It's really having something fix the body as a whole, but while doing that, actually being there for you and being able to, even on a subconscious level, whether you were aware of it or not, actually help navigate and bring the system into a place where it can actually function well. Okay, so I've got a question, I'm going to read it. I have a client who was on SSRIs for 16 years and has been clean from NSRI for 6 weeks and 3 weeks from SSRI. How much Scaletium would you recommend for withdrawals and rebalancing, and would you recommend lion's mane and ashwagandha and magnesium, and add anything additional to lessen the symptoms and side effects? So yes, I would add Scaletium. The dosage that I would look at, if it's an adult, would be 500 milligrams to a gram twice a day, in the morning and then in the afternoon again if needed, not after 4 or 5 o'clock. You actually when you take your last dosage of Scaletium at 4 or 5 o'clock, you sleep really well. It actually assists with sleep then, and it also assists with restless legs. Lion's mane, yes, I would add lion's mane. Ashwagandha, yes and no. Ashwagandha is adaptogenic. In most people, ashwagandha does miracles. In some people, it does not. So it also have to see how the person specifically reacts to the ashwagandha. I would add copper. You can get a copper chelate from Solgar. Copper is not a really easy thing to get hold of, together with a magnesium. And it depends on the symptoms and depends on the person. Blue lotus is amazing for calmness, and blue lotus is in so many forms. From the tea to the tincture, to different forms of blue lotus. There are different medicines that actually also helps people. Sananga is amazing for depression. Sananga can lift you just right out of that field. The indigenous people talk about what they call panema, spiritual disease, which is classified as a dark aura or an energy of depression and despair. And Sananga is one of the plants that can actually lift a person out of there. But once again, Sananga isn't everybody's medicine. And it's not a medicine that everybody has to or wants to work with. But that's also a beautiful medicine. How long would you recommend they stay on this combination, or would it be allowed to be taken as long as needed? As long as needed. Some people it's a month, some people it's 3 months, some people 6 months, some people it's 2 years. It's not indefinitely. It takes quite a while for the system to actually be repaired and to come into balance. And while doing that, I would really look at it holistically. Look at therapy, whichever form that takes. Look at shadow work, look at trauma healing, and do look at supplementation and the gut as a whole. How does one improve copper naturally besides diet like fish and nuts? So you do get a little bit of copper in when you drink out of copper vases. That is also one of the things. And cherries apparently has a lot of copper in, and the stems of cherries is very high in copper. So that's some of the natural ways. The problem is our soils are extremely copper depleted. So there's not so much copper in our diets like there used to be. Yes, I would arrange the transcript for this webinar. Is there any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself should you want to ask a question, or anything that you'd like me to go further into. If I've got the information, I will share.
So I've got a question here, specifically not related to scaletium, but the use of DMT in terms of using DMT with regards to serotonin and dopamine, adrenaline.
Yeah. So firstly, this is going live on Facebook and YouTube as well. So I must just also legal disclaimer. DMT is not legal in South Africa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. The psychedelics and DMT specifically binds to the serotonin H2A receptor. It actually, if you look at the receptor sites, it's also where your own electrical signals conduct and where energy binds. There is some interesting studies on DMT. I would be very careful with it. Especially in patients with mineral deficiency or that has problems conducting energy. What DMT can do is it can run literally more electricity through the human body than the human body is used to. And although it can give people an outside perspective, if not used responsibly, it can also damage the energy body and the physical body. So maybe if there's more questions on that, I can answer individually from the studies that I've read and things that I've seen. But that's more, I think, a broader question. I use ginseng and was advised that it helps with feeling anxiousness. Yeah, it can. Ginseng is a stimulant, and any stimulant can actually increase anxiousness. When a person is anxious, I would not necessarily use scaletium specifically. Okay. Okay. There is a question that I can answer in terms of academic knowledge and studies that I've done. The question is on taking iboga and psilocybin with scaletium to treat depression. Once again, I'm not a medical professional, and I can only transmit the information that I've seen, the studies that has been done. Iboga is a very, very interesting and special and amazing plant. Just to give you some perspective, after an iboga flood, what the studies has actually found is, so these receptors that I showed you earlier with the neurotransmitters moving through them, the receptor sites can be damaged. Things like cocaine and heroin and alcohol and many, many other things damage actually these pathways, and specifically the dopamine pathway is what you see in heroin addiction, opioid addiction, and that's actually the most of the studies done on iboga is on addiction. So what happens is after an iboga flood, in the studies that I found that the receptor sites looked like the day that you were born. Under a microscope before, because of damage done by stimulants and chemicals, it literally looks like this, not smooth and not a lot of receptor sites on it. After an iboga flood, what they found is that the receptor sites are repaired back to blueprint, back to like the day you were born. They also found that all your neurotransmitters and chemicals were being rebalanced, your serotonin, your dopamine, your melatonin, your noradrenaline, all of that. Iboga flood is when they give a high dose of iboga by a trained facilitator. There are actually iboga clinics in South Africa, and it is a legal Schedule 7 medicine. When working with iboga microdosing, studies have found that you get a similar effect over an extended period of time, where you actually get a repair to the pathways, the synthesis of the neurotransmitters, and the repair of the brain. It's quite incredible medicine. Iboga, like scaletium, would give you the observer perspective on your emotions. Iboga has the ability to give you the observer perspective on your mind. It is also can be very dangerous medicines when combined with any chemical, should not be taken up lightly, and should only be used by trained professionals. Psilocybin, once again, also MAPS actually just did a lot of studies on it, and they found it very effective in the treatment of depression. It actually enhances the natural production of DMT in your body. It binds to the serotonin H2A receptor. It's been shown to have quite amazing effect on depression and PTSD in controlled situations when served by a professional. And with these medicines, there's also a really good reason why there's a lineage and why there are people that are highly trained that administer these medicines and that advise on these medicines, because you cannot only look at the physical. You cannot just look at the clinical study. You cannot just look at what is happening in the brain chemically and in the body. There is a spiritual aspect, there's an energy aspect that really needs to be considered and shouldn't be taken up lightly. The combination of them is going to be very specific and needs to be recommended by somebody that's highly trained on them, because dosage specific. When combining iboga, psilocybin, and scaletium at the wrong dosages, one can induce serotonin syndrome, which is really, really dangerous. So I would not recommend anybody just home medicating on it. But it is an interesting question, and I hope I answered a little bit on it. Okay. Complicated PTSD. Yes, and turn to drugs to numb. So that is also where the plants shine. So there's a question that this is very helpful. Thanks. I worked with complicated PTSD diagnosed in clients and women who have experienced sexual trauma and turned to drugs to numb. I myself suffered from complex PTSD, and it is really not a nice place to be. I do not blame anybody for wanting to numb and not be there. And I really think this is where natural remedies can help, because you're not only looking at a chemical and a physical solution, you are actually bringing in the spirit and the assistance and the energy of nature. Something like Scaletium can be quite amazing to help you deal with complex PTSD. Lotus, amino acids like L-theanine, magnesium, and many other things you could actually look at for complex PTSD, but it's quite important that the person has somebody that can actually work with them on it. What is serotonin syndrome? Serotonin syndrome is when there is too much serotonin available. It is something that can be fatal and should not be taken up lightly. Too much serotonin then causes muscle pains, spasms, ataxia, and then can actually turn fatal. Also that can happen when combining wrong medicines with each other. I do not recommend, as a rule, combining any chemical medicines with natural medicines, and even the combination of chemical medicines can cause serotonin syndrome. So that is something that should actually be taken up seriously and considered when making decisions. Serotonin syndrome is highly unlikely when working with the right dosages, recommended dosages of natural products, and not clumsily combining them. Serotonin syndrome becomes a risk when combining strong medicines that all work on serotonin, or medicines that binds to the serotonin receptor sites, which is where psychedelics bind. Any contraindications for using Scaletium regularly? Patient-specific. Scaletium has got a really low profile of side effects. I would not recommend any medicine be used forever. Sometimes it is, however, I use Scaletium chronically for about 2 to 2.5 years. Now, Scaletium is one of my favorite friends. I've got Scaletium at my disposal, and when I am really having a more tougher day, I use Scaletium. It is quite safe to use on a chronic basis, but the end point should always be to not be on it for always. Any questions? Okay, so there's a question. Okay, so there's two questions. So one is, what is my take on ketamine infusions for treating medicine-resistant depression? This is not something I've experienced myself. I've not had a ketamine treatment, so I cannot talk out of experience. I can talk out of studies. There is really profound studies being done by many places at the moment, including MAPS and including Stanford University. There's a quite interesting talk that you can listen to on psychedelics and the brain by Dr. Huberman on YouTube. I highly recommend it. In that talk, they also go deeper into it. It has been found to be one of the most effective treatments for some types of depression and sometimes types of PTSD. It seems to be very patient-specific as well. It is a dissociative. It works a little bit different, but by relieving the person from what they're experiencing currently and just bringing the system back into all. But there's a lot that goes into that, so I can't go into that very deeply. There's a question that says, still don't know if you use scaletium as a powder or as a plant. You can have scaletium in your garden. It's beautiful. I've got quite a tough time growing it in the Western Cape. It is a plant that actually grows more in the Kalahari, Van Reinsdorp, Kanaland is where it grows. You mostly use it in a powder. The powder needs to be fermented for maximum efficacy. It activates the other alkaloids. So they would then ferment the plant and then powder it, and then it can go into capsules. You can also use the powder as a tea. And like I said, it's not really stable in an alcohol tincture form, but there is people doing really beautiful work where you can actually get scaletium in a stable form in drops. Any cancer reversal natural medicine suggestions, please? That is a really, really big topic. I've actually got a friend that specializes in cancer treatment. You can contact me afterwards and I can give you the number also. The only thing I actually work with specifically that has been shown for cancer and cancer reversal is carbon 60, C60. The guy that discovered C60 actually won the Nobel Prize. So C60 is a carbon molecule in the shape of a soccer ball. When you flatten it, it actually looks like the tree of life. It works on a mitochondrial DNA level. The one study that they've done, what they actually did is they took rats that are used for cancer research. So what they do is they delete the genes that prevent cancer. So in this amount of rats, they know that these rats are going to die by a certain age and they will die of cancer. When they administered C60, the rats lived 90% longer. Only one of them had a tumor and he didn't die of the tumor. And that's just one of the studies that's been done for cancer on C60. So C60 is something I would highly recommend for anybody working or dealing with cancer or immune system problems. And we can use it as a plant. I don't really know scaletium being used as a fresh plant. The Bushmen, what they do is they dry it and then they use to chew on the plant itself in the fermented form. And you also get scaletium in a concentrated fermented paste that looks like Marmite almost, where a dosage would be like a match head. Where do you get C60? C60 is available on the internet. I've got a C60 that is water soluble, that is more bioavailable than others. And the reason I've got it is because I use it myself and I have clients and family that really can use C60. And this is the most bioavailable form I could find. Questions? Yes.
Yeah. Any autoimmune diseases and perhaps, like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, use of scaletium, is there any benefit for those?
So there's no studies done on scaletium specifically for autoimmune diseases. I actually had 4 autoimmune diseases myself that's completely gone and healed. So autoimmune disease on its own is quite interesting, and there is a way that scaletium could actually assist people with autoimmune diseases on more of an emotional level. So at the core of an autoimmune disease is what it is it's your own immune system not recognizing you as you. It's attacking your own system is attacking itself. So on a deeper level, to actually go look at where am I not recognizing me as me? Where do I want to kill myself? Where am I angry at myself? What parts of me is not integrated? What parts of me do I not accept? To the point where I'm actually angry at it to be wanting to attack it, because that is what's playing out with the immune system. And on that level, I do believe that scaletium is one of the tipping factors that gave me the ability to actually step out of my own autoimmune diseases and actually look at myself and look at my own shadow and look at the places and the pieces of myself I really didn't want to look at or recognize, and being able to love and integrate that. Scaletium is really good for assisting that process. The C60 is also amazing for autoimmune diseases. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
So final question for me, the C60, we said with regards to cancer reversal, what about, aging patients? They don't have any cancer yet, but could it be a preventative for overall health and well-being, and probably to stave off sort of cancer? Would that assist?
Yes.
As a sort of
yes, it would. And there's so I'll share a link. I'll share a link to research on C60 with this talk as well when I post it. So C60 has been shown to actually increase longevity, increase performance, and actually fix the body as a whole. I take C60 myself as a supplement, and it would then also prevent and actually bring it. It helps with, on a DNA level, actually bringing the system back to blueprint. Okay, so I'll send you more details on my website. There's an about us, and you can also WhatsApp or email me. I do offer consultations, and I do help people on a one-on-one basis as well. If there's anything else, just pop your hand up or let me know. I'll close this one, my idea. And thank you, everybody, for your patience and bearing with me with the surprise visitors and dogs barking, and this being my first webinar and me just also finding my feet. My ideas with this webinars was more to have it an interactive question and answer, where I can, like I say, what I can do is I can share from my own perspective. I can share from my own studies. I can share from my own experience and experience with working with people. And yeah, I am sharing my perspective. My perspective is by no ways the whole and the full truth, or even the truth. It's the way that I look at things, and everything that I've come across up to now. So if I want to do more of these webinars and also talk on different topics, but the idea is to just talk briefly and more ask people to actually interact, answer questions on a variety of topics. So if there's any topic that you would think of that you would like me to talk on, please do let me know. If you would like a longer talk and a less of a question and answer, or a more comprehensive talk on a specific topic, please also let me know. And then I hope that everybody enjoyed this. And I really, let me just see the last questions. Okay, we've got email addresses. I don't have stockists in Joburg at the moment for my entire range. I courier countrywide. And if selected, I can always, most of the time, I can courier overnight as well. So the powder, I sell Scaletium in 500 milligram capsules, but there are sources that sell the powder as well. When you Google buy Scaletium powder, you'll find it. I would recommend using a fermented powder if you are using a powder. I'm quite specific on where I get my Scaletium from, how it's fermented, the energy, the frequency, and the quality of the medicine. So I hope that you all are going to have a beautiful evening further. Please stay warm. Enjoy the sunshine in Cape Town and the cold weather. And Have a blessed evening. And please do, I am gonna, in the chat, I am gonna share quickly my email address. It is on the website as well. If there's any questions, you're welcome to ask. If there's any specific topics, like I said, any requests, please let me know. And I hope all of you have a beautiful and a blessed evening. Bye.